met the Fresno night crawlers on the N2 monitor at 1:27 a.m., and the binder said, "Don't record." The little speaker under the screen chirped anyway, one clean note, even though the audio icon showed muted, which meant the cameras were already lying to me. Night shifts teach a person what an empty building sounds like. So when that chirp cut through the usual hum, my stomach tightened, and my hand went straight to the export port out of habit. I had to keep my compliance score above 90 through sunrise, or the system would flag me for inattentive monitoring again, and that meant losing the contract, losing my badge, losing the one job that let me answer the phone if my brother needed me. A thin sleeve sat in the desk drawer with a faded sticker that read N2, the same handwriting as the binder tabs, and the foam inside had the shape of a drive pressed into it, like someone had already taken the evidence out. On the screen, the yard was empty in every other camera square, but N2 showed two pale legs stepping through the floodlights, like they were walking down invisible stairs. No torso, no shoulders, just knees that bent the wrong way, and a gait that looked almost polite, like they were keeping time to that chirp. The binder smelled like old toner and burnt coffee, and a printed memo sat on top with a coffee ring, chewing the corner. The email subject line had been copied into the margin in pen, short and official. Access exceptions. The first line was underlined twice. Do not export N2 footage. A second line followed, the ink broken where the coffee had soaked the paper. If motion triggers on N2, view live only, log it, walk away. Under that, someone had added a third sentence in the same tidy hand as the sticker. Accidental captures go to compliance immediately. That last line felt helpful, even merciful, which is how traps usually feel when a person is tired. My phone buzzed on the desk, face down, a calendar reminder I never turned off because guilt worked better than alarms. The reminder didn't say my brother's name, just a blank phrase I could pretend was for work. Call window. I set the phone aside and did the thing I always did when stress made my thoughts slippery. 2 taps on the door latch, 2 taps again. The latch answered with a solid click, so I told myself the office was still my safe space, and I kept watching. The night crawlers crossed the floodlight pool and stopped at the fence line, directly beneath the camera. Their feet weren't feet at all, just rounded ends that flattened and unflattened against the concrete like soft rubber. The chirp sounded again, not from the yard, but from the monitor speaker, and my eyes flicked to the recording icon before I meant them to. A red dot blinked once. The dot should not have been there. My thumb hovered over the export button because the system punished missed anomalies, and my last write-up had been for failure to document an intrusion that nobody else believed happened. A cold thought landed clean in my head, sharp enough to be a one-liner and ugly enough to be true. Proof is only proof when it stays put. The legs shifted and the camera auto exposure pulsed, like it was trying to decide whether those shapes counted as people. A glance at the corridor light test checklist, clipped to the wall, gave me something normal to hold on to. Every hour I walked the same path, checked the same fixtures, signed the same line, and got graded by a machine that never slept. The pen on the chain by the clipboard was sticky where someone had chewed it, so I wiped my fingers on my pants and told myself to follow the binder. View live only, log it, walk away. The chirp sounded a third time, and the red dot blinked again, and the dot pulled my hand like a magnet. If I ignored this, and the next audit flagged it, my badge would deactivate before I could even argue, and then I'd be stuck with no job and a brother who needed a person to show up, not a plan. I hit export. The monitor didn't beep. computer didn't ask for a password. The red dot just went steady like it had been waiting for consent. The legs moved again and the image skipped back a few seconds. 3 steps. Pause. 3 steps. Pause. My own reflection floated in the dark glass over the camera grid, and for half a second my face was doubled. One copy a fraction of an inch to the left, as if the screen couldn't decide where to place me. The export progress bar appeared and disappeared too fast to read. Then the recording dot went dark. A silence hit so hard I felt it in my teeth. The little fan under the desk kept spinning, but the building's background layer vanished. No hum from the lights, no distant water pump, no radio static from the charger dock. The room held its breath, and my hand stayed on the mouse, because moving suddenly felt like breaking another rule I hadn't seen yet. My phone buzzed again, and the vibration was the only sound that proved time was still moving. A voicemail banner popped up on the screen from the work line. Not my cell, which made no sense because the work line never rang at this hour unless something went wrong outside. I answered without lifting the handset, speakerphone on because my hands were already shaking. "Log it, no video," my supervisor said, voice flat with sleep. "I already hit export," I said, and shame made my throat dry because that was confession and defiance in the same breath. A pause, then a sound like paper sliding across a desk. "Delete it." The instruction landed like another line in the binder, which meant it wasn't advice, it was policy. The night crawlers on N2 stopped moving. The camera held on their legs as if the lens had locked focus on them, and the rest of the yard blurred slightly like the world was politely stepping out of frame. "I need proof," I said, and the words came out too fast because fear of being blamed always made me talk. "Proof isn't part of the job," my supervisor answered. "Compliance is." The call ended without goodbye, which was normal for work calls. But my palm stayed hot where the phone had been, like I'd pressed it to my skin. A new window opened on the desktop, one I had never seen before, with a simple prompt that looked like it belonged to a training program. Submit capture. My cursor hovered over it because the third line in the memo had said accidental captures, go to compliance immediately. And my brain wanted a rule that sounded like safety. The foam outline in the N2 sleeve sat in my mind like a missing tooth. Something had already been submitted. The legs on the screen took 1 step, and the camera skipped backward again. 3 steps. Pause. 3 steps. Pause. The chirp came from the monitor speaker on the pause, steady as a metronome, and the note didn't match any alert sound the system used for doors or motion. My own hands moved into view on a different camera square, one of the interior feeds that should have shown an empty hallway. The square showed a close-up of the office door latch, and my fingers were tapping it twice, the way I always did. But the angle was wrong. That camera was mounted above the hallway exit, and it shouldn't have been able to see my hands in the office at all. I stood up so fast my chair rolled back and clicked against the wall, and the sound came back all at once. Hum, pump, distant water, everything returning like a held breath released. The hallway camera square didn't change. My fingers kept tapping the latch on that feed. 2 taps again. The image wasn't live. It couldn't be because my hands were at my sides. If the system was replaying me, then the system had footage of my body inside the office from an angle that didn't exist. A cold sweat started at my ribs and slid down my sides, and I wiped my palms on my pants because my brother hated when I left smears on the phone screen during call windows. The binder page with the memo had 2 staple holes at the top left that didn't match the single page in front of me, and that detail sat quiet in my peripheral vision until my brain finally admitted it mattered. Someone had torn out the first page. I pulled the binder open, careful, like it might bite, and flipped through the tabs until I found a section labeled with another short handwriting cue: Procedures. The paper crackled with dryness, and a sticky note clung to the inside cover, half peeled, the adhesive browned with age. The note was in different handwriting, sharp and impatient. Do not fix what repeats. Under it, a laminated card had been tucked into the plastic sleeve, warped slightly from heat, corners frayed. The card smelled faintly of disinfectant, like it had been wiped down too many times, and the printed text was clean and simple. If the N2 feed loops, do not rewind. If you rewound already, do not submit the capture. If you hear the chirp, close the screen and look away. That second line felt like a correction, which meant the memo on top of the binder was either newer or wrong, and my stomach sank because I'd just obeyed the wrong one. A tiny thumbprint smudge stained the card near the word submit, as if someone had tried to rub the ink off with a bare finger. The work line rang again, and I let it ring because answering felt like volunteering my voice into a system that was already impersonating my hands. My brother's call window sat behind my ribs like a ticking thing, but the phone stayed face down, silent, because fear made me selfish in small ways, and my selfishness always came dressed as duty. The office door latch clicked once. No one touched it. The sound didn't come from the door itself either. The click came from the monitor speaker, a perfect imitation, as if the system had decided sound could replace reality. I moved to the door anyway because movement was the only way to keep panic from turning into paralysis. The floor under my boots felt faintly springy, like damp wood, even though the office had concrete slab under industrial carpet. My heel sank a fraction deeper on the third step, and I stopped, staring at the spot, because a building shouldn't change texture under a person's feet without warning. A second click came, softer. The latch was still set. 2 taps on the latch, because habit was a prayer I didn't believe in but still used. The latch held. Relief tried to show up and couldn't find a place to stand. The N2 feed looped again, and on the third cycle, the camera view shifted a few inches to the left. No motor sound, no mechanical pan. The camera simply decided it could see more of the fence line than it could a moment ago, and the night crawlers were no longer under the floodlight. They were closer. The frame now included the service door to the yard, the one with the crash bar and the motion sensor above it, and the sensor's little indicator light blinked, even though the door was closed. A piece of tape over the sensor had been placed at an angle, the kind of quick fix someone did when a device kept throwing false alarms, and that tape looked freshly handled. Tape doesn't look freshly handled after months. Tape looks freshly handled after someone touches it in the dark. The thought forced action, so I grabbed the flashlight from the charger dock and stepped into the hallway, because corridor light tests were my routine, and routines were how I proved competence to a machine. The hallway smelled like wet concrete and river algae, a sour edge that didn't belong indoors, and the floor tiles reflected my light in tiny, dull squares. The exit at the far end was a dark rectangle, and the stairwell door sat halfway between, painted the same bland color as every other door so the building could pretend it was safe. A little metal tag hung from the stairwell handle, the kind you use to show maintenance had checked a door, and the tag was turned backward. On the back, someone had drawn a simple mark with pen, 2 parallel lines connected by a short diagonal like a crooked ladder. The mark made my skin crawl, not because it looked occult, but because it looked like a quick reminder someone thought they'd understand later. I checked the corridor lights, one by one, and each motion sensor woke the fixture with a gentle click, except the third one, which stayed dark. The third fixture had power, sight. The emergency bulb inside it glowed faintly, a dull orange dot. But the overhead light didn't come on, and the darkness under it felt thicker, like a substance. My flashlight beam crossed that patch and jittered, not from my hand, but from the air itself, as if something invisible had moved through the beam and refracted it. The building's hum stopped again. Not faded, stopped. The silence in the hallway made my ears ring, and a small part of my brain tried to make that ringing into the chirp, because humans hate blanks. A soft sound came from behind the dark fixture. Not a footstep, not a scrape, but the dry, delicate whisper of a page turning. No paper sat out here, no binder, no clipboard. Just that page turn sound once, perfectly clear, as if someone in the dark had flipped to the next instruction. I backed away from the unlit patch because every instinct said crossing under it would be agreeing to something, and I returned to the office with my flashlight raised like it mattered. The monitor grid showed the hallway camera I had just walked through, and in that camera square, the dark patch under the third fixture looked normal. My light didn't jitter in the feed, my boots didn't slow. The recording dot in the corner blinked once, like an eye. I forced myself to look away because the laminated card had said close the screen and look away when the chirp sounded, and the chirp had just sounded in my memory, even if it hadn't in the room. The chair scraped as I sat, and the scrape sounded too loud, too personal, like the building had returned its attention to me. A handwritten note sat under the keyboard, folded twice, paper softened by sweat. The note wasn't official. No letterhead. No subject line in the margin. The handwriting was rough and tired, and the sentence broke at the end like the writer had been interrupted. If they reach the glass, kill the screen. Do not call them out loud. Keep the door latched. Twice. That last part matched my habit, which felt like someone stealing my reflex and turning it into rule. My phone finally lit up with an incoming call from my brother, right on the edge of the call window, and guilt hit like a punch because I'd been putting it off. Answering meant splitting attention between the screen and my brother's voice. Ignoring meant failing him. The moral dilemma wasn't dramatic, just two obligations, colliding in an ugly normal way. The work manual didn't care about my brother. My brother didn't care about my compliance score. I answered and kept my eyes on the desk instead of the monitor. His voice sounded thin, strained, breathy in a way that always made my chest tighten because it meant pain or panic. Door stuck, he said. Key wrong. He lived in assisted housing, and the building changed locks when management felt like it, and he couldn't always handle the change fast. Stay inside, I said, then caught myself because giving instructions made me sound like I could control anything. Stay where staff can see. Staff gone, he said, and the words came out clipped, like he was saving air. My hand moved to the desk drawer with the spare key ring out of pure muscle memory, which was stupid because that ring held my work keys, not his. A lie tried to form in my mouth. I'll be there. But the building held me, the contract held me, and I hated myself for how quickly I started calculating. Leaving now meant the system would log monitor unattended, and the supervisor would have a reason to terminate access before morning. Staying meant my brother might be stuck behind a door that didn't recognize him. The third option, the one nobody wanted, sat on the desk in the shape of the work line and the supervisor who slept through everything until a metric complained. I put my brother on speaker and dialed my supervisor with my other hand because asking for help felt like weakness, but it was the responsible move, and responsibility had to matter in a world where rules were traps. The supervisor answered on the second ring, irritated. "No emergencies," the supervisor said. "My brother is locked out," I said, and saying brother out loud in a work context made me feel exposed. Silence on the line, then a sigh like someone scrolling through policy. "Leave a note for staff. Finish the shift." The call ended again, and my brother's breathing stayed in the room, thin as paper. A cold anger rose, and it pushed me toward a choice that was both pro-social and reckless. If policy couldn't protect him, then policy wasn't worth obeying. I grabbed the N2 sleeve from the drawer and slid my fingers into the foam outline where the drive should have been. My fingertips touched something hard at the bottom, wedged under the foam. A small plastic drive sat there, no brand, no markings, but the same faded sticker on its side. N2. Someone had hidden it like contraband. The foam felt slightly damp, as if it had absorbed sweat from the last person who panicked and shoved it back. My brother's voice kept going, a low stream of breath and frustration. "Key wrong," he repeated. And I realized he was stuck in a loop too, not supernatural, just human. The kind of loop fear makes. I had a choice between breaking one rule to possibly stop another. The binder had said accidental captures go to compliance, which meant turning this over to the same system that told my supervisor to delete. The laminated card had said do not submit if rewound. My drive had been exported, and the recording dot had lied, and the hallway camera had shown my hands where they couldn't be. I decided the system didn't deserve my trust. I plugged the N2 drive into my personal phone with an adapter I kept for emergencies because I needed to see what the building claimed to have seen, and because proof that could leave the building might protect the next person, even if it couldn't protect me. The video opened without a file name, just a blank thumbnail that should have meant corruption. My screen went black, then lit with the N2 feed. 3 steps. Pause. 3 steps. Pause. The chirp came from my phone speaker, not my monitor, a clean note that didn't match any notification sound I used, and my skin prickled because the rule had said, close the screen and look away, and I was staring harder than ever. The legs on the video shifted and the frame widened as if the camera lens had grown. The fence line didn't just get closer. The fence line bent. The view now included the office window from outside, the one behind my desk, glass dark with reflection, and my own silhouette sat in that window like a cutout. My silhouette held a glowing rectangle at chest height. My phone. The video was showing me watching the video. A panic loop hit, fast and physical. Stop the video, stop it now. My thumb stabbed the screen to close it, but the swipe gesture didn't work. The phone didn't freeze. It accepted input and ignored it. The worst kind of betrayal. The reflection in the window on the screen moved, and the legs moved. And the legs didn't get closer to the fence, they got closer to the glass. The sound layer in the office dropped out again, total silence, and my brother's voice vanished mid-breath. The call didn't end, the timer didn't disappear. Sound simply stopped existing. I looked away like the laminated card demanded, staring at the stained carpet, forcing my eyes to find a thread and hold it. But the glow of the phone lit my palms, and I could still feel the video moving without seeing it. A tiny vibration traveled up through my wrist, a low pulsing hum like the phone was matching the chirp in another language. The office door latch clicked. Not from the monitor speaker this time. From the door. 2 taps on the latch, hard enough to hurt my knuckles because pain was proof of my own body. The latch held. The click came again, gentler, like someone on the other side was learning the mechanism. The sound layer returned in pieces. The pump hum first, then the fluorescent buzz, Then my own breath, ragged and too loud. My brother's voice came back, but it wasn't his voice. The speaker pushed out my supervisor's tone instead, flat and annoyed. "Delete it," the phone said, using the supervisor's voice over my brother's call. My stomach turned because it meant the system could route voices like it routed footage, and my brother's real breath was somewhere behind that. A thought cut through the fear, clean and practical. 2 hypotheses. Either this was a human test, a cruel compliance exercise designed to catch guards exporting footage and hiding it on personal devices, or this was the thing the rules were actually about, a process that used observation as a door. My hands shook, but competence showed up anyway, the old training that said prove or disprove with a controlled test. I chose the human test hypothesis first, because believing in an explanation made of policies and punishment felt safer than believing in something that could move through screens. I unplugged the phone and powered it down. Full shutdown, because a human test would leave logs and timestamps, and shutting down would create a gap. Then I turned the monitor screen to black with the privacy button and sat with my back to it. Because if I was wrong, then watching was the hook. Silence returned, softer this time, like the building waiting politely. My fingers found the binder's torn staple holes again, and the missing first page became a physical itch. I opened the shred bin under the desk, the one used for old sign-in sheets, and the smell of paper dust rose, dry and sharp. A torn sheet sat on top, crumpled once, then flattened. The missing first page. The same email subject line appeared in the margin. Access exceptions. The first line read differently from the coffee ring page. Do not export N2 footage. So far, same. The second line was the trap, and it hit my eyes like a spotlight. If you captured them, submit it to remove liability. Remove liability. Not protect staff. Not stop intrusion. Just remove liability. The next sentence had been crossed out in pen heavy enough to tear the paper. Submission confirms contact. I didn't notice it then, not in the way it deserved, because my brain grabbed the word liability like it was a lifeline and ignored what the pen had tried to scream. My brother's call timer kept running in my head, and that forced the next action. If this was a human test, then my brother's voice should still exist somewhere on the line. I turned my phone back on, not to watch the video, but to check the call. The call screen returned, timer still counting, and for a second I felt relief that had nothing to do with monsters and everything to do with not losing him. Then the contact name at the top changed. My brother's name wasn't there. The screen showed my own number. The phone insisted I'd been calling myself the whole time. A cold shame flushed through me, because the lie I'd been telling myself, that I could hold both duties at once, fell apart in one simple display. I hit end call. The moment my thumb pressed it, the office monitor chirped behind me. One clean note. The monitor wasn't even facing me, screen black, but the chirp came anyway, and the air in the room grew colder. Not winter cold, but the kind of cold that makes surfaces feel damp. The back of my neck prickled, and I knew the human test hypothesis had failed, because no compliance department could make temperature change with attention. I turned in my chair slowly, like sudden movement would offend whatever rule was in effect now. The monitor screen lit without my hand on it. The grid of cameras returned, and every camera square showed the office. Not the yard, not the hall. My office from different angles, some angles impossible, ceiling corners that didn't exist. A low shot from under the desk that looked up at my knees. The N2 label sat in the corner of each square, as if the entire system had become N2. On one of the squares, my phone lay on the desk, screen glowing, and in that screen's reflection, two pale legs stood behind my chair. No sound came from the chair, no footstep, no scrape. The legs were simply present in the reflection, and the reflection held them with more certainty than my eyes did. The handwritten note under my keyboard said, "If they reach the glass, kill the screen." And my hand moved to the monitor power button like it could still be that simple. The button didn't respond. The monitor stayed on, bright enough to hurt, and the chirp repeated, and the office door latch clicked once, not from the door but from inside the wall, like a sound file being played by a building that had learned what frightened me. My stomach clenched hard enough to make me dizzy, and the guilt spike hit sharp and fast. This started because I wanted proof to protect myself. That guilt forced the next action because sitting with it would have killed me faster than cold. I grabbed the laminated card from the binder sleeve and pressed it against the monitor glass, using it like a shield even though it was just plastic and text. The card's corner curled, and the ink on the words smeared faintly, like heat was rising from the screen. The card decayed in my hands, subtle but undeniable, and the idea of finite resources snapped into focus. Every use costs. I read the card again, lips moving without sound, and the third line that mattered most sat clean and simple. If you hear the chirp, close the screen and look away. Closing the screen hadn't worked. Looking away might. I shut my eyes. The chirp continued, which meant sound didn't require sight anymore. A new line appeared on the monitor, typed across the bottom of every square like a caption. The words were small enough that my eyes had to focus, which felt like bait. I forced myself not to lean in. My reflection in the dark screen surface didn't line up with my shoulders. It lagged half a second behind, as if my body had a delay in the system. A soft pressure settled on the back of my chair, not weight, but presence, like air thickening. The office window glass behind the monitor fogged in a neat oval like breath. No person stood there, no mouth. Just that breath mark, forming and fading, forming again. The urge to run hit hard, but leaving wasn't just leaving a building. Leaving meant surrendering the only controlled space, and surrendering meant letting the system decide what footage existed of me afterward. My supervisor's voice returned in my head. Proof isn't part of the job. And anger flared again because obedience had been packaged as safety. A small competence win was still possible. Containment. If the rules were about observation, then I could change what counted as an observer. I grabbed the spare jacket from the chair back, the one I wore when the night air off the river cooled the halls, and I draped it over the monitor. The screen's glow dimmed under the fabric. The chirp stopped. For the first time all night, the room sounded normal. My breath came in a shaky laugh I didn't trust, and relief showed up in two sentences that felt like a victory. The note on the keyboard didn't matter. The screen was covered. The chirp was gone. Then the jacket began to sag inward, not from gravity, but as if a hand inside the fabric was pulling it toward the glass. Two pale shapes pressed up under the jacket, long and smooth, creating the outline of legs from the inside, and the cloth darkened where they touched it, dampening like condensation. The real rule landed with sick clarity. The screen wasn't the danger. The record was. Covering the monitor didn't stop witnessing. It just moved the witness from the cameras to me. The jacket slid another inch, slow and patient. The office door latch clicked twice, like my habit. 2 taps, 2 taps again. The latch wasn't being tested from outside anymore. The latch was being practiced. My brother's absence on the call screen returned to my mind like a bruise, and I realized the system had already started rewriting who I was connected to. If I let this continue, then the first thing I'd lose wouldn't be my job. I'd lose my ability to reach him at all. The next action came from duty, not courage. I grabbed my keys and shoved them into the drawer, then yanked the drawer shut, because the keys were metal and metal was a boundary in every old story I'd ever heard, even if the binder never said it. The drawer slam made the jacket jump. The legs under the fabric jerked, not startled, but adjusted, as if sound gave them data. A new caption line typed itself across the bottom of the covered screen, visible only where the fabric thinned. Submission confirms contact. The crossed-out line from the torn memo was back, now clean and official, printed by the system itself, which meant the system had always known and had chosen when to reveal it. My mouth went dry. A thought arrived, simple and mean. Compliance wasn't protecting anyone. Compliance was feeding the record. The trap rule wasn't an accident. It was bait for tired people who needed to be told safety could be outsourced. A knock came from the office window, soft, not a fist, but a gentle tap, like a fingertip on glass. My eyes flicked up before I could stop them. 2 pale legs stood outside the window directly against the glass, and the rest of the shape above them wasn't missing. It was absent on purpose, like the world had cropped the file. The legs didn't have knees anymore. The joints were smoothed, simplified, as if the longer they stayed in frame, the more the system compressed them into something efficient. The window glass fogged again, and a line traced itself through the fog from the inside. A crooked ladder mark, the same one on the stairwell tag, drawn by something that didn't need a pen. A coldness spread from the window into the room, and the air smelled like ozone, sharp and metallic, like electronics overheating. My phone buzzed with a new message notification, and my hand went to it on instinct before I remembered the rules about screens. The message preview showed my brother's name again, a relief so strong it made me dizzy. The content was one short line. Open it. My thumb froze above the screen. A human explanation still hovered, thin but possible. A compromise system, a supervisor playing a sick game, an automated audit that used fear to enforce compliance. The other explanation sat heavier. The record itself was reaching for new witnesses, using whatever voice or name would work. The moral collision came back, sharper than before. If the message was real, my brother needed something now. If it wasn't, then responding would be giving the system a new piece of me to rewrite. I didn't answer the message. I turned the phone face down, and guilt stabbed so hard it forced a different action. I dialed the assisted housing front desk number from memory and let it ring, because if my brother needed help, a human could still help him, even if a system was trying to cut me out. The call connected, and a tired staff voice answered, real, imperfect, annoyed. "Front desk," the voice said. "My brother is locked out," I said, and I kept my voice steady because panic made people dismiss calls. A pause, a keyboard clack, then, "Staff is on it." Relief hit like a wave, and it mattered because it meant my pro-social choice did something real in the world, even if it cost me in this room. Behind me, the office door latch clicked once. The latch slid. The door opened an inch. Cold air slid in like a hand. The jacket over the monitor lifted slightly, pushed from underneath, and 2 pale legs stepped out from the cloth onto the carpet, leaving no wet prints, just a faint depression like weight without mass. The legs stopped, perfectly still, as if waiting for a camera cue. My flashlight beam caught them, and the light didn't reflect the way skin reflects. The surface looked matte like fabric, but smoother, and the edges of the shape shimmered with tiny scanline artifacts, as if the air around them was struggling to render. A still frame moment burned into my mind, the clearest thing I'd seen all night. One leg had a seam line down the side like a stitched costume, and the seam ended in a small metal tag embedded in the ankle, the crooked ladder mark stamped into it. No blood, no wound, just a manufacturing detail which made it worse, because it implied design. The legs bent, too far, then straightened without effort, and the office door opened another inch on its own. After that, the description stopped mattering. Containment mattered. I backed toward the filing cabinet because metal boundaries still felt like boundaries, and I grabbed the roll of evidence tape from the top drawer, the kind used to seal broken locks after vandalism. The tape smelled like cheap adhesive and dust. My hands shook as I pulled a strip, and the tape tore unevenly, which annoyed me in a stupid human way that grounded me enough to move. I taped the office door shut, strip after strip, not as decoration, but as a physical declaration. Door stays closed. Boundary stays intact. The tape didn't hold for long. The first strip went slack, not peeled, not ripped, just sagged like gravity had changed direction. The second strip stuck. Then the adhesive turned glossy and wet, as if the tape had been licked from the inside. The legs stepped closer, silent. The office monitor chirped under the jacket. One clean note, and the jacket slid off the screen by itself, folding neatly on the desk, like someone had finished using it. The camera grid flashed. Every square showed the office again, but now the squares included the legs, and the recording dot blinked steady in all of them, an eye that had found its subject. A new prompt appeared, centered and bright. Submit, capture to remove liability. The trap rule had become a button. My supervisor's voice came from the monitor speaker, flat and familiar. Submit it, the monitor said. The voice was wrong in small ways, a syllable too clean, no breath, but the phrasing matched every policy conversation I'd ever had. The system wasn't trying to scare me now. The system was trying to make me compliant. My hands clenched into fists, then opened, because fighting wasn't the right motion here. Witnessing was the weapon, and submission was consent, and the only way out was to starve the record. I reached for the monitor power cord and yanked it from the wall. The screen went black. No chirp, no glow. Darkness in the office felt like a victory until the darkness began to brighten from somewhere else. My phone screen lit on the desk, even face down, casting a rectangle of light up onto the ceiling. The reflection in the office window lit too, as if the glass had become its own screen. The legs didn't vanish when the monitor died. They stepped closer, and the air around them shimmered, and the ceiling light flickered once, then steadied, like a camera finding exposure. My brother's name appeared on my phone again, message preview changing without my touch. Submit it, the preview read, in my brother's name. The human test hypothesis and the entity hypothesis both failed at once, because the truth was uglier than either. This wasn't a supervisor, and it wasn't a ghost. It was a system that used obedience as an interface. Policy was the ritual. The rules weren't there to keep people safe. The rules were there to teach people how to consent in small, tired ways. A new sound rose in the building. Not the chirp, not the hum, but a low electronic buzz that matched the frequency of my own nerves. My throat tightened, and shame hit again, because I understood the pattern now and still had to act inside it. Every good action would cost something. I grabbed the torn memo page and the laminated card and shoved them into my pocket, because paper was a record I could carry without a screen. Then I did the only thing that felt like breaking the right rule for the right reason. I stepped into the hallway and propped the office door shut from the outside with the metal trash can, not to trap the legs inside forever, but to buy time for the next shift, for anyone else who might walk in and get offered a liability button. The trash can lid clanged as it wedged under the handle, and the sound echoed down the hallway like a bell. The corridor light under the third fixture stayed dark, and the darkness under it looked like it had depth now, like an opening. The page turn sound came again, once, behind that unlit patch, like someone flipping to the next procedure. A cold line of sweat ran down my spine, and my body wanted to sprint, but I forced a walk, because running felt like panic, and panic made sloppy choices. At the lobby desk, I opened the day shift logbook and wrote in plain handwriting. No codes, no drama, just a warning that could be believed. I wrote that N2 footage should never be exported. I wrote that submission removes liability by confirming contact. I wrote that the chirp means stop looking. My pen shook so much the letters wobbled, and that wobble felt honest. Then I tore the N2 sticker off the empty sleeve and stuck it to the logbook page right next to the warning, because a physical mark mattered more than a digital file now. The sticker's adhesive peeled a little, corners lifting, decay starting the moment it got used, which matched everything I'd learned tonight about finite resources. The work line rang once more, and I let it ring. My phone buzzed with one last message from my brother's name, and I didn't flip it over. A quiet relief settled in when the assisted housing front desk number called back and the staff voice said, "Door fixed. He is inside." That line was a tiny victory, and it cost me something personal, because it confirmed I might not get home with my identity intact. But it made the world slightly safer for him, which mattered more. The exit door to the building stuck for half a second when I pushed it, and the glass in it reflected the hallway behind me. Two pale legs stood at the far end of the hall, directly under the unlit fixture. Not moving, not chasing, just waiting in the place where the light refused to turn on. The legs didn't need to run. The system did the traveling for them. I left the binder open on the desk, torn memo tucked into the front, laminated card visible, handwritten note placed on top like someone meant it to be found. The last sentence I wrote in the logbook wasn't poetic, just the clean truth my throat could handle. I followed the helpful rule, and the helpful rule almost erased my brother. Outside, the air felt normal night air, and that normalcy made the dread sharper because it meant the building could pass as harmless to anyone driving by. On the walk to my car, my phone screen lit in my pocket without my touch, and the glow seeped through fabric like a warning light. The message finally showed on the lock screen when I couldn't avoid it. A new sender name appeared above the text. Not my brother, not my supervisor, just a folder name I didn't recognize. The message was one quoted line, neat and official, like it had been written for someone else to find later. If you've seen that mark before, do not ignore it. My hands shook as I slid the phone into the deepest part of the glove compartment because hiding a screen felt like an act of containment now. A last thought followed me home, a survivor question that kept spinning, and no matter how many times I tried to stop it. I keep asking myself whether the system needed me to break the rule, or whether the rule needed me to exist. A week later, the logbook page I wrote showed up in my email drafts as a scanned attachment, routed into a folder that wasn't mine, and the sticker that read N2 sat in the corner of the image like a signature.